You guys good? Diana, you good? Lindsay, Tiffany, you good?
I'm good.
All right, before we call the meeting to order, I think in my time being on the board, we had not had a meeting on 9/11, so this would be the first meeting that we had. So before we begin this evening, I would like to take a short moment of silence to remember those who lost their lives today and those who have since lost their lives defending our country. So if you'd bow your heads with me and take a moment. Thank you. Mr. Kern, call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Here.
Mr. Melody,
Here.
Mrs. Rigby,
Here.
Mrs. Gillis,
Here.
and Mr. Valentine.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance, Dr. Marshausen.
Mrs. Bailey, if you would like to come up.
Dr. Marshausen, Mr. Kern, and Mr. Valentine, members of the Board of Education, it is our honor to be here this evening. I am Martha Barley, principal of Old Sawmill Elementary School, and I am joined by students who exemplify intentional and thoughtful responses to everyday events in our school. Countless events happen to us every day, and for each event, there will be an outcome. If we want to positively impact that outcome, we must respond with intention. We are learning to press pause, get our minds right, step up, adjust and adapt, make a difference, and build skill. Historically, our PBIS tenets have been to be positive, respectful, and responsible. And those tenets align seamlessly with the R factor. These children here respond to events with positivity, respect, and responsibility, and our entire school community benefits from their actions. May I introduce to you Evelyn Young. She's in 3rd grade. Larkin Nosik, right here, and Ariana Miller are our 4th grade representatives, and Alice Desiak and Leah Fonkalan represent 5th grade. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That's our brand. Yeah, you have one.
I have one, yes.
Yeah, that's our brand.
They don't let me wear t-shirts.
We choose happy.
I would like.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you for bringing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got
All right. Moving on to approval of special meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the August 9th, 2023 special meeting minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Second by
Second.
Mrs. Gillis. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
Mr. Melody, Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Abstain. Motion passes 3-0. Mr. Melody and I both abstained. Approval of the regular meeting minutes of the August 14th, 2023 regular meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Mr. Melody. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Recommendation to approve the August 28th, 2023 regular work session meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Approval of the agenda for this evening's meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Melody. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mrs. Rigby. Questions or comments? Fairly straightforward. I text messaged you guys because we had caught earlier about executive session, but no executive session this evening. All right, there be no questions or comments. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Presentations, Dr. Marshausen.
At this time, it is my pleasure to invite to the podium our county auditor, Michael Stanciano. Michael and I have worked together in various capacities for over a decade now, and happy to have him here to share some information about the reappraisal in Franklin County and answer any questions that the board members may have.
Well, thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I am Michael Senziano, and I have the honor of serving as your county auditor. I'm serving in the second term, and obviously the auditor's office is taking on a big endeavor this year with the 2023 mass reappraisal. So the first question we get is, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this now? So we're doing it now because we're required under Ohio law. Every 6 years, all counties have to do a mass reappraisal. That is, go out and evaluate and update the property valuation of all properties across the county. That's not just residential, but industrial, commercial, agriculture. If we do not conduct the mass reappraisal in coordination with our partners at the Ohio Department of Taxation, the Department of Taxation can withhold 50% of our local government funds. And also, if we don't adopt their recommendations, the outcomes aren't great. We've had other counties recently seek litigation and weren't successful. So every 6 years, mass reappraisal. We do have 3-year increments. So if some of you are thinking, didn't you just do this? In 2020, we had a triennial update. That's more of a reflection of what's going on in real estate prices, not the mass going out reviewing all almost 450,000 parcels across Franklin County. What we do as the mass reappraisal, we are viewing all the properties. We're making sure that the characteristics updates are occurring. We aren't looking solely on what's going on in the real estate market, although that does play a large role, and particularly in a community such as ours that continues to be one of the leaders, not in Ohio, but across the country. We do a visual inspection. We go outside the property. We never go inside. So property owners will play an important role throughout the process. And we're looking at neighborhood data. What's going on? Are there sidewalks? Are the streets good? Are there wonderful schools? Are there wonderful park centers? Are they walkable? All those factors will play a role in what will become the auditor's tentative value. We are now out and about across the county with the auditor's tentative value. You can find all that information when you visit the Know Your Home website. It's a one-stop shop of all things mass reappraisal. Go to the county auditor's website. It's prominently right there to click. And from this page, we're trying to answer the two biggest questions we get. What's my property value going to be? And what are my taxes going to be? And we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. But also, anyone that feels there's information about their property is inaccurate, they think it should be higher or lower, you can schedule appointments through the Know Your Home Value website. You can also look at your neighbors' values. That's the third question we get. What are my neighbors' values? And so we have been very deliberate in making that information as accessible as possible. It's something we've always had. We can answer that question, but we really want every property owner that's comfortable to go out, investigate that information themselves and not just hear it from the government official. Our process really began in August. That's when the Know Your Home Value website was launched, so any property owner could view the tentative value at that time. It has been followed up with a mailer, so notification to all property owners should also be occurring in the mail. We are now in September, which is the opportunity for those property value review meetings. You can either submit documents if you don't want to meet with the person. There's also an opportunity to meet in person at a number of locations across the county throughout September, or you can schedule a virtual meeting with an appraiser. And in those meetings, we want property owners, if they feel the value isn't adequate, to provide documents. Have the conversation with us. They're about 20 minutes long of what we may have missed if there's something going on inside your home. So outdated kitchen, flood damage, things we're not going to see with an exterior inspection. That's where the homeowner plays an important role. Also, if our property card information is inaccurate, so say you have less bathrooms than what we have reported, or the square footage is off, we don't go inside the home, and so having that provided by the property owner will play a role and a factor in how we set the final values. Anyone that schedules, so when you get the notification or when you view that property, we ask every property owner to kind of evaluate, if I was going to sell the property today, is this in the range that I would sell it for? If you're satisfied with that, you don't have to do anything else. That value will carry forward in December when the treasurer, not the auditor, the treasurer sends out the property tax bill. But if you do take advantage of submitting documents or meeting either virtual or in person with a office appraiser, we will take that information at those meetings. A final determination won't be made then. We have to go back to the Department of Taxation, talk about what we heard, make any recommendations, have the Department of Taxation agree with it, and then we will notify all those property owners in December of what will now be that final determination, again, when the treasurer, not the auditor, the treasurer sends out that property tax bill. And then if people still aren't happy, we will have an opportunity to work through the Board of Revision, again, to make sure those values are correct. This is what the mailer looks like. Again, trying to answer the biggest questions we get, what's my value, and encouraging people to look at the Know Your Home Value website to look at our tax estimator. It's an estimation because values aren't final, so you'll see a range, but it really does show that a value could go up and your taxes could go down. Your value could go down and your taxes could go up as well. And so that tax calculator is something the office has not done before, but it's the biggest question we get after what's my value. And then obviously that third one, what are my neighbors' values going to be? If a property owner does want to participate in a property value review, they have an important role, and that is making and scheduling that appointment and then bringing the documents that are helpful. Third-party appraisals are great information, pictures, making sure the data record is correct, or any recent sales that are going on in your neighborhood. While we think we've got a lot of great information, we know every neighborhood is unique. Every property owner knows what's going on even better than we do, and so we want to work with those property owners that feel there needs to be an adjustment or change to what was currently the tentative value, ultimately will become the final value in December. As mentioned, we're out and across the community. We'll have 21 times at 11 different locations across September, so very active, even with an Ohio State football game in the Upper Arlington area this past Saturday. We were out at Grove City, and we were out in the Canal-Winchester area last week. We will be in Linden tomorrow. King Arts Complex is kind of our one-stop shop for all things commercial property owners, and it will be rotating throughout the rest of September. Any property owner that wants a in-person property value review is welcome to attend these. They are not meant just for those specific communities. It is spread out across the county intentionally so that all members of our community can participate. Again, opportunity, if you bring any documents, we will scan them in, add them to the record and evaluation. You can submit those documents ahead of time as well. And then hopefully, because we are scheduling these, you walk right on in, meet with your appraiser, and you're out in 20 minutes. So hopefully the most convenient opportunity you've had if you've ever done a property value review in the county before. We weren't scheduling prior to the current administration and prior to COVID, so it was a little bit more of a cattle call. So we're hoping this is a much more property owner-friendly opportunity. But that information also available on the Know Your Home Value website. As mentioned, the property tax calculator is getting a lot of attention. A lot of people really seem in disbelief that their value can go up and their taxes can go down. it can happen. And so the calculator is meant to show that. We took all of our taxing districts where they're at in the life cycles of the bonds and issues that are occurring. You can plug in your value, you can plug in other values. So if I was seeking an increase or decrease, what that implication could be on that range of taxes. Again, unfortunately, it's a range, not a guarantee of this is what your tax will be, because we don't know what the final values are going to be, as well as we don't know what may be passed on the ballot this November. But that is a very helpful tool. Anyone, neighbors, community members that have questions about it, we are welcoming those as we continue to explain tax equalization and reduction factors as best as we can. Understanding that across our community, we are seeing a historic increase that's due to a number of factors. The hot real estate market, population growth continues to boom, housing continuing not to be kept up with that. We always cite a little out-of-state laws. We understand there could be concerns about this process, not only why are we doing it now, but if anyone feels that they ultimately could be property taxed out of their home. So there are a few resources at the county, highlight those. The Auditor's Office administers the PTAP program, Property Tax Assistant Program. It's a one-time opportunity for qualifying individuals to get tax assistance. The Treasurer's Office always advocates for a payment plan, so instead of 2 property tax bills a year, you can stretch it out, maybe budget better. And the Treasurer's Office has her STAR program, which is meant to work with property owners that are worried about going into default. And so there are a few options and tools in the toolbox. Always want to make sure people are aware of them, but understand that maybe that isn't enough. So encourage anyone who has questions, please email the office at appraisal@franklincountyohio.gov or call the dedicated reappraisal number, 614-525-3388. You can always call the 525-HOME, which is the general auditor's number, but if it's mass reappraisal specific, this will get you to the subject matter experts quicker. So that's the real big moving piece on the reappraisal. Any questions at this point? Seeing none, I love it. Now we'll talk a little about levies and the other big moving piece that's going on and that I think you all are keen and aware of. So the office conducts a value of the votes mailer and notification. We notify every property owner when there is a bond or levy issue that is going to potentially affect their property taxes with a postcard of, hey, this is coming, want you to be aware of it, because the worst thing we hear is someone gets their property tax bill and what happened. And so the ballot levy estimator is another tool that the office uses. The levy estimator or the tax estimator that's on the Know Your Home Value website does not account for any levies that are potentially on the ballot this November. It is a current reflection of where people's tax bills are. So that is a factor that's in there, but the levy estimator is coming. It is meant to show what the impact will be of any bonds or levies. There are a few this fall, not only for Dublin, but Columbus City Schools, as well as the library system. So every property owner will be notified because the library system is countywide. That will include certified information on the ballot, as well as any rate changes based on the reappraisal. So this is what the levy estimator looks like on the website. Not very attractive, mostly because it's blank right now, but this is where the certified ballot language, as well as anticipated effect on tax bills, plus we include any brief explanation language that the taxing authority wishes to include. So that's what we've always done, and it will show kind of the listing of any recent levies or where a taxing authority is in their levy cycle. What is important, both for the mass reappraisal and with levies, is the auditor's reappraisal. While it's going to be historically high across the county, it is not a one-to-one on property taxes. You take 35% of the auditor's appraised value, combine that with your taxing district, and that's how we get to the property tax bill. So if someone sees a 20% value increase in their property value, that does not mean their property taxes are going to go up 20%. That is the big kind of highlight we always have to share and remind folks. It's not one-to-one. Also, effective tax rates are adjusted, so levies will always collect what they're supposed to, but depending where they are in the cycle, it dwindles down. So that's where, on the Know Your Home Value website, the tax estimator is so important, and where people can really see a value go up, but their taxes go down. And the concern we continue is, well, isn't this whole process meant so local governments can receive a windfall? No local government receives a windfall. When entities go to the ballot, asks their community for their support and the community gives it, that is the set amount. The mass reappraisal, tax equalization, none of it results in a windfall. That is the outside millage component. It is set, the benefit of the bargain is established, and nothing will change. Although, if your value goes up higher than the average in your delineated neighborhood, so the other properties you're being compared to, your taxes would go up in this process. At the same time, someone else's would likely go down. So everything gets adjusted a little differently, but it's important for people to understand that, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about this today, as well as kind of the other real head scratcher for folks when we talk to people. And so I'm going to read really closely my notes on this one because that's important. So in our review of the Dublin City Schools levy on the ballot, it does include an operating levy and a 30-year bond levy. The operating levy portion is certified to raise $34,218,000, which is on the 2022 values, would be a 7.9 mil increase in cost, $277 per $100,000 of value. But as values increase, the amount to collect per 100,000 would raise the same of revenue. So with the new value increases, the actual effective rate, even though it's not showing up on the ballot this way, is actually 6.27 mils, meaning $219.45 per $100,000 in value. So it drops, not magic math, not magic tax, but that 7.9 we understand is the language, what's been certified, but with the new values, it actually comes down to that 6.27. At the same time, the operating levy portion certified to raise, the bond portion is authorized to raise up to $145 million in bonds to be paid over 30 years, and at the 2022 values, this would mean an estimate of 1.99 mils at a cost of $70 per $100,000 in value. Again, with the increase that we are seeing, it actually would be turning the effective rate to 1.58, meaning about $55.30 per 100,000. So for a home that started at $303,000, for example, increases with the reappraisal across Dublin School District, the value increase is 32%. So it gets us to a $400,000 average at that property. We project that the cost of the levy, if it passed, would be about $1,099 total, payable in 2024. So that nuance of what the ballot language is based on the old values, but here come the new auditor's values, which will be, if approved, tied, shows that change. So while there will be a change in taxes, it will not be as high as it somewhat projects when you see the ballot language. And we are again happy to include and clarify as best we can with the ballot levy estimator language. When do new property values affect levies? So I think I've already explained all that, so a lot more words, but I mean, it'll kick in when the tax bill comes out in January. And so that's where you'll see the change and impact to any property owner if a levy passes for any of the communities that will have them on the ballot. With that, that is the presentation. Happy to answer any questions. Again, thank you for the opportunity, and I really should have started to congratulate you on such a great beginning of the school year. I know it's an exciting time for everyone, and now that the weather's cooled off this week, it seems even more fun. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. Look forward to your questions.
Yeah, real quick, Auditor Stinziano. As you can see in the one slide there, we plan on being no new millage for the bond issue too. So I know that's something you have to certify a millage for as part of the process, but that's something, if you want to explain how we work with that, that doesn't really have the 920 effect as much, but we do work with your office, and we're great. We have a great working relationship with your office and how we set the debt millage every year.
Can I explain it? I mean, I can. It might bore everyone pretty quick. So we do work on the debt limit. You've got different entities when the language is certified. We've got great experts, and as we kind of allocate out, we will work with taxing authorities to what they want to do. And so with House Bill 920, as you mentioned, not back in the day, it does not increase or create that windfall. With tax equalization, none of this process is going to result in additional dollars above and beyond what is going to be agreed on the ballot. Any other questions? It's a great way to start a meeting, I know.
So can we back up one slide, please? All right. Nope. I'm sorry. Okay, this one. So on if the operating levy and the bond levy are both fixed dollar amounts, when proposed and approved. The example here, 2022, the home value of $303,000. The taxes are roughly $1,050. And then when the valuation goes up in 2023, how come the tax also increases by almost $50 when the bond and operating levy are fixed dollar amounts?
So it goes down if approved. It doesn't go up.
The additional tax liability, though, increases.
So on the inside-outside millage piece?
Yeah, is that because of the inside millage?
So inside
It's shown
millage is
here.
the first 10% not voted on, and it will increase on its own. That wouldn't affect the levy. The outside millage is the next 90%. So I think that's what
So in
you're
this
alluding
example,
to.
that $50 difference is because of the inside millage, and there will be a slight increase on the inside millage.
Yes, there will be a slight increase on inside millage with the reappraisal process, yes.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions or comments from members of the board?
I'd like to thank you and your staff. Auditor Cinciano, you guys have been great. We've had multiple back and forth phone calls, conversations, making sure that we can clearly communicate to our community about reduction factors and all of these different processes. So please thank your staff for us. They've been great for us to work with.
I appreciate that. We do have, as I think you can appreciate, a very talented staff, and I just try and get out of their way. So we look forward to continuing to work together, and if any board members or members of the community have follow-up questions, don't hesitate. You can always email me, auditor.stinziano@franklincountyohio.gov as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to public participation. One second. In accordance with Dublin Board of Education bylaws 0165.1, we will have public participation this evening. We have one individual signed up, Mrs. Julia Fix.
Goals. I am disappointed that I've not heard more questions asked by our elected board members about these goals. First, Section 1A, early literacy. Our district's goal by the end of the school year in 2030 is to have 100% of our students performing at or above a 47th percentile rank using MAP scores. As one of the richest and highest performing districts in Central Ohio, why isn't our goal at least average rather than 3 points below average? Why aren't we using state or national averages as our benchmark instead of a private testing platform that we pay for? Section 2B, titled Physical and Mental Wellness. Reading over that entire section, there isn't a single word written about physical wellness. Everything refers to mental health. Our district already employs 23 psychologists for 22 schools, some of which make $120,000 per year. We also employ 15 student services support specialists, including many social workers. Some of these staff members make over $110,000 per year. We spend a tremendous amount of money on student mental health. If we really cared about mental health, we would start talking about simple, tangible things we can do, like limiting screen time during school hours, including for lessons, work, and testing, creating more opportunities for outdoor classroom spaces, incentivizing participation in athletics, and expanding course offerings to include athletics as an option. We can't keep doing the same things over and over and expect a different result. On to Section 3A, staff development, recruitment, and retention. That policy states each year over the next 5 years, we will sustainably increase the number of ethnically diverse certified staff and applicants. It goes on to talk about potential staff who are recruited and interviewed. The first question is this policy data-based? In our district, Asian students outperform every other racial demographic. Asians are also the most underrepresented in our teaching staff. Our own district's experience contradicts the rationale behind this policy. Next, how much money is this going to cost? If the policy only requires that ethnically diverse people be recruited and interviewed, but makes no mention of hiring, what is the point? Isn't this just a waste of time and money because there's nothing in it about actual hiring policy? Finally, does the district plan to set aside already scarce resources to develop a legal fund to defend against lawsuits that may be filed by disgruntled applicants who are overlooked because of their race, which is a foreseeable result of adopting this policy? There are many unanswered questions about these Journey 2030 annual goals. Please vote to disapprove the resolution. Thank you.
Moving on to Board President, Board of Education comments, reporting out on committees. Does anybody, Mrs. Rigby, start us off?
Yes. So I am reporting on the Superintendent Teacher Advisory Council meetings. A lot of great information for the first session, and I'm just going to try to boil it down to 6 points that I think are important. There was consensus among both groups that this being the first time they've seen an approval rejection language in a levy, and they were very appreciative of that. They asked about a redistricting heads up and if that's possible, and it was explained that it's not, just because based on whether or not the levy is accepted or rejected will depend upon how the district is redistricted, so can't give a heads up at this time. The Ohio Revised Code, I thought this was interesting, that requires us to announce redistricting by the end of January, so that time frame was asked about. Number 4 was the Meet the Teacher and Curriculum Nights. They had varied success across the district. Some schools did better than others, and so I think there was a good conversation about engaging with teachers and principals and PTOs and sharing best practices among the schools as to how to increase participation and make those nights as good as they can be. So that was a really good conversation to be a part of. And then there was comment about the early literacy data being ready sooner than expected in some of the schools, and because of the timing, some of the schools have that data earlier, but then the services aren't offered until October. So, but the teachers understood that generally that's when, these meetings happen as far as offering services, because that's the way it's always been. It's usually late September, from my understanding, or early October. So, they thought with the earlier start to school and now some of the districts receiving their data earlier, is there a way, there were questions asked, is there a way to start those services in the schools that have completed their data and their analysis? And then the last thing was just really a question mostly for the 4th and 5th grade teachers, because we've moved to standard-based evaluations and scores, just kind of transitioning that new language with the new Infinite Campus and having consistent standards across, the district as far as what each thing means. For instance, is mastery, is that 80%, or what does that benchmark look like? They felt a little bit uneasy at this point, but they think by the time they get to the report cards, they're going to be fine. And teachers just collecting the data and where they're putting what they're collecting right now, and it was mentioned that they can put that information into Google Classroom for the time being as they work through Infinite Campus and how that's going to roll out and what that's going to look like for parents. And I think that's it.
Just real quick, I attended the PTO leadership meeting last Thursday. Lindsay wasn't able to make it. There were representatives from the DEF that spoke to the group, talked about different ways that the PTOs can partner with the DEF, and especially encouraged middle school engagement with the DEF. Apparently there's only been 10% of the funding go to the middle school level, so they're trying to up that. Dr. Marshausen also shared levy facts with attendees and gave them an opportunity to ask questions. There were a lot of questions around growth and how each levy outcome will affect different buildings. I think that was They talked a lot about that. That's basically the entire meeting.
All right, I'll go next. Last week, we also had the first BAC meeting of the year. We did kick it off with introductions because there were several new BAC members for the year. And then continuing the theme here, the levy discussion, that took up the majority of the meeting. A lot of questions, a lot of information from Dr. Marshausen, a lot of questions from the members on validating the need and the impact if it doesn't pass, and building capacity and redistricting and kind of all those common themes as well. So that really dominated the majority of the meeting. And then we closed it out with a discussion around DCS University, about the opening session that was taking place back in August, and then the upcoming session on September 20th.
I don't have anything else at this time. I know we have policy that'll be coming up in the not too distant future, so we'll definitely have more to report out on that side come that time.
And equities meeting tomorrow night.
All right, Maria.
Hello, my name is Maria. For those of you who I've not met, this is my first time officially presenting. I'm Maria Rivera Alvarez. I'm the student representative for Jerome. And as we head into the beginning of the school year, we've had numerous student activities and events, all worth mentioning, but I'll keep it brief for tonight. So first, our most prominent activity of the past few weeks has been the Coffin and Jerome game, which was last week. And in the past, it has been an issue because of the rivalry between the two schools. But something that the principals and band directors both did this year was host a Better Together breakfast between representatives from the marching band, from cheer, from the football athletes. And it was basically giving speeches to maintain healthy competition while still staying better together. And although the Rocks were victorious last Friday, us Celtics are determined to persevere throughout the season. Along the same lines of sports, the Scioto girls tennis won 3 matches, specifically in the Hilliard-Bradley doubles tournament, and girls soccer also won 3 matches. With the beginning of club season, which is a reflection of the plurality of interests that are supported and represented within the Dublin City schools, it's been a good club fair and beginning of clubs such as service clubs and competitive clubs. As far as Hope Squad goes, I don't know how familiar you all are with Hope Squad, but it's a really important part of our Jerome community for suicide prevention. Recently, we've had students nominated this year, and we've celebrated those nominations in the past week. Our next football game, September 15th, we are planning to partner with Jerome Jungle for the Teal and Purple Night to raise awareness for National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. So that is a common theme that you will see in Jerome and for Hope Squad across the district as well. Also notably, we had our Dublin Music Boosters annual fund drive for Jerome. This is a specific fundraising activity for Jerome, for Kaufman, and for Scioto. Kaufman specifically does Band on the Run 5K. And for Jerome, we raised around $18,500 just in cash and check. And all of these proceeds go to getting new instruments, new equipment for marching band, for orchestra, for concert band in general. So this was a great united effort with the orchestra and band members. And for senior activities, we've actually had a lot of college preparation and graduation preparation. For example, some ordering of cap and gowns and some workshops for college applications, so also getting into the season of that for seniors. We've also had some homecomings. Kaufman's homecoming was last weekend. They had a Rocks Bowl, which was a flag football activity for school spirit and for fundraising. And they had a pep rally. Scioto and Jerome have upcoming homecomings for late September. And most importantly, as a student, I felt that our recent R-Factor training at school has been a really important factor of the community that we promote. One of that was learning how to respond to situations instead of reacting, which was the main goal of these monthly trainings, and evolving this mentality of I need to I get to. So thank you so much for your time.
Any questions for Maria? All right, moving on to reports and action items from the superintendent's office.
Well, as we've heard in the reports, and Lindsay mentioned that we will continue at all of our engagement groups to share the levy facts with our different constituency groups. Who Our Equity Council meets tomorrow. Our senior citizens are coming together for lunch on Wednesday. We have also begun the process of visiting folks' living rooms in the community to share information in small groups of 12 to 16 people. Thanks to the board members who have been able to attend some of these groups. One of the things that we want our community to know is that if there are people in a neighborhood who may have concerns or may be opposed, we'd still like to be able to share those facts so that everybody is up to date and fully informed and engaged when they make a decision themselves on November 7th. I think the board members who have attended those meetings would say it's not always sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, that there are tough questions and that we can field those tough questions. And as a community, and Maria will hear this as they go through our factor, we embrace productive discomfort. We understand that in order to be a leader in this district, you have to be able to have those tough conversations. And you have to be able to face some of the things that make Dublin a special place to live, and that's the tremendous diversity of thoughts that we have. So if anyone's interested in hosting a community meeting, all you have to do is email and we'll put together that schedule. We have teams that go out and do that. I'm about halfway through with staff meetings, and thanks to our staff, the folks sitting around the table, and Mike and Christy and Donna for joining us at almost all of them, as we visit each staff to share the Levy facts with the staff. We know that our teachers are the most trusted ambassadors that we have in the district. And again, we want our teachers to have the facts, so when they're asked questions such as, how does this levy impact current property values versus the new assessed property values, everybody can accurately say now, and we're going to get this information out, that 6.27 mils is what this will equate to on new property values. So we want to be able to get that information out so that our community has accurate information while making those decisions. Our principals will be hosting community meetings for their parents and their individual communities starting on September 18th, next Monday. And we have asked each principal to reach out to their community to host an information meeting, once again, just to share that information. We will have CO staff there. Mr. Kern and I have trained up most of our staff here at Central Office to understand at a 30,000-foot view, Ohio tax laws, House Bill 920, reduction factors, no new millage bond issues. So the principals will be able to speak to the parents in their school community about what will the impact be with approval, what will the impact be with rejection, so that there is a clear, transparent picture for every person who goes to cast a ballot about what our school district will look like on November 8th, depending the outcome of the election. And then again, if people have questions, superintendent@dublinschools.net, we schedule those meetings, and we're happy to come talk to anybody. As we talk about our Journey 2030 annual goals, Journey 2030 was adopted by the Board of Education unanimously back in March. The specific goals we're talking about now have already been approved by the board. What we're doing is we're putting annual measurable, SMART goals to what the board has already approved. The Board of Education has already said we want a more diverse teaching staff. That's in Journey 2030. What we're doing now, and what we've already talked with our legal counsel about, is how do we reach that goal? So what we're asking approval for tonight in each of these areas is an annual measurable objective so that we can put data to what the board has already approved so that we can talk to our community about the progress we're making. Mrs. Marple went into great detail at the last board meeting about why we use MAP, why we use data that's not a state assessment system that has changed 4 times over the last decade, and how important longitudinal data is. And as a district, we have used MAP for a decade, so we get to see that longitudinal data. So these measurable objectives are there. We will give a mid-year update to the board in February. We will follow up next July with a final report, end of the year report, at which point, working with the board during the spring, we will either tweak or adjust or change the annual goals. That's why they're annual. So the 2030 plan is designed to be a North Star for the next 7 years. The annual goals are annual opportunities to put data to those goals to measure how are we doing. And they get reset every year. So as we look at those, it's part of what you ask of me in my job description is to provide annual goals. And now, based from the first time since 2007, with the strategic plan, we are able to put these goals in front of us and set a course for the direction that we'd like to go. There have also been some conversations about our clinicians, counselors, and mental health professionals. And I'm going to ask Mr. Andrus to talk about all the different types of counselors we have, the roles that they play within the school district, and the services that they provide that are critical to our students. Mr. Andrus, if you could help me out here.
Absolutely. So when people think of counselors in Dublin City Schools, these are generally the 5 areas that come to mind. So I'll start off with psychologists. As of this school year, we have 25 of them, 23.4 full-time equivalents, a couple are part-time. And in some districts, they function in a dual role. They do special education evaluations, and they serve as mental health specialists. But in Dublin, that's not necessarily their role. In Dublin, our school psychologists function much more in the world of special education, doing evaluations, and also in the world of Section 504, doing those evaluations and monitoring those plans. So sometimes when we have conversations with new school psychologists who are interested in coming to Dublin, that is definitely something that we talk to them about, how our role here is different than in other smaller districts. The next role comes from our 2 drug and alcohol counselors. Now, these individuals are licensed chemical dependency counselors, and they're highly trained in this specific area. They're also, historically in Dublin, these positions have also been people who are licensed social workers or licensed professional clinical counselors. And the great part about that is, substance use disorder and mental health issues are often co-occurring, and so they can treat both needs for our students. We have 47 school counselors, or 46.5 FTE for our school counselors. Now, some people call them guidance counselors, and there's nothing wrong with calling them a guidance counselor. I prefer the word school counselor simply because that's what ODE uses for them and for the Ohio standards for school counselors. Inside that standard is a great quote that I'm going to steal and read to you, because trying to describe what school counselors do from elementary, middle, and high, it's pretty difficult. So on page 3 of that document, it says the daily work of a school counselor may differ depending on the setting and context, so urban, suburban, rural, elementary, middle, high school, career technical center, and so on. At the core, however, the work of the professional school counselor is always to provide direct and indirect service in support of students' academic, career, and social emotional development. So that's true in Dublin. At the elementary level, our school counselors, so there are 15 at the elementary, our school counselors, they are in classrooms at least 1 time a month. And they're focused more on teaching kids to manage their emotions and learn to utilize interpersonal skills. Our middle and high school counselors, they make this transition. They still work on that area, but they're more into helping students with their scheduling, to focus on academic and career development. So they can assist students with course scheduling, successful transition to post-secondary education in the world of work. School counselors do have a role in mental health. They do support us in crisis situations, and I'm going to talk about the Columbia Suicide Screener here shortly. But their primary focus is not to be mental health specialists. That's not the role of a school counselor. Centero is the 4th one on the board. Centero is a community-based mental health organization, and we've partnered with them for many, many years, stemming from a grant that the Adam H., or the Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Board of Franklin County, they provide that to Centero, and Centero clinicians work here in the district. Now, we currently have 4 of them, and when they're fully staffed, we'll have 7 or more. That grant is for prevention and education. It's not for intervention. So we supplement that grant to make sure that those counselors, or I'm sorry, those Centero clinicians can do intensive mental health work for a portion of their day. And finally, we have our mental health specialists. Now, I put that up there because in Dublin, we've called them S3s for the longest time, student support specialists. But when I say that, a lot of people don't exactly know what that means. So then we say, well, they're school social workers, but some of them are licensed professional counselors. They're not social workers. So in general, our umbrella term is a mental health specialist. And so over the past few years, it's been necessary for us to change that. They provide mental health, intensive mental health support in our district. We have 16 of these. 15 are Dublin City Schools employees, and 1 we get at no cost to the district through the Ohio Health Athletic Training agreement that we have. So these 16 individuals are the ones in Dublin who provide that intensive mental health support to students who have the highest level of need. You know, mental health knows no boundary. There are kids in every building in Dublin, from every background that you can imagine, who have things that have happened to them in their life that you sometimes couldn't possibly imagine. In order to access the great academic opportunities we have in Dublin, they need an additional layer of support. And that's the support that our mental health professionals provide. And we have more students in need now than we ever have before, and have more need than the staff that we have right now. So this is why we're doing the OSU cadre for 25 more school social workers. I thought I'd bring some data to you about the mental health crisis, but then I thought you can Google that, or you hear it all the time. Like, you know it's out there. I wouldn't be telling you anything new. So that was a review of the 94 fantastic individuals that we have here in Dublin and their specialized role in terms of mental health support and counseling students in different roles. Finally, I thought I would share a stat that you can't Google, and that is the number of Columbia suicide screeners that we completed last school year. So if you haven't seen that, please just do a quick Google search for the Columbia Suicide Screener, and you can see the 2 different areas, suicidal ideation and basically a suicide attempt. So 200 Columbia Suicide Screeners we gave last year in the district. That means a student said or did something that made a staff member believe that they would harm themselves or they had harmed themselves. 8 of those 200 were first graders. So I have a 3rd grader and a 5th grader. And when I say 8 of those kids were first graders, like, it's hard to understand. 9th grade is where we see the highest number of Columbias. And many of these students were hospitalized after the completion of the suicide screener, meaning something happened that their parents came and took them, and they were actually hospitalized after that. These are some of the scariest moments in our schools, and student safety is of the utmost importance, as we know. It's important that our staff are trained to be able to do that calmly and appropriately. So far this school year, we've done 8, which is actually down from last year. At this point last year, we had done 19. Prevention and education, it does work. It requires resources, but provides our kids the tools necessary to be able to work through challenging situations like this in their lives. And sometimes people say, well, what mental health areas are you focused on? The majority of what we see is anxiety, depression, PTSD, and then various what they call ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, such as abuse, neglect, experiencing violence, things that, again, happen to kids in every building across our district, regardless of a variety of factors. So those are our kind of mental health and counselor staff roles. Do you have any questions?
I do. Sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the numbers. But I would like your input as to why you think there's such a jump for 9th graders. You know, and is there, I know Mrs. Fix spoke to the physical side. You know, we do spend a lot of time talking about the mental health and counseling, and I'm not diminishing any of that importance. Is there also consideration to is there a physical component to some of this? And, I mean, the natural endorphins and the natural goodness that comes from physical activity. And I don't know, I'm just trying to think out loud, and it's obviously the numbers are very concerning. But I just wondered in particular about ninth grade and what your thoughts are.
I think a lot of people could have different assumptions on just the age of the students. 13, 14 years old, that could be a part. The transition from middle school to high school, you're now in a setting where you were an 8th grader and now you're not. You are new in an environment, but also, there's a lot of influence out there we talk about social media and peers and different things. The interesting part about asking big questions like this is if you were to ask an individual after they've conducted a Columbia, it would be hard for them to compartmentalize and answer that for a big group because everyone is so individualized. Every situation that a child encounters leading up to, let's say that Columbia, for example, it's so unique, and I don't know that they could put that into an area and be able to say globally this is the problem, because at that moment for that child, it could be a variety of factors, not just one thing that happened that day, but things that have happened in their life for years and years and years. Now, the physical component, that's a great question. When we talked about Journey 2030 last board meeting, we said how difficult it was to try to take the student experience and bundle it into 2 goals. And one of them is absolutely trying to make sure people have trusted family and friends and adults at school. But please don't forget that the other goal that we had talked about all of the events that happen in preschool all the way up through grade 12 and beyond, and those SEALs that we talked about in fine arts and student activity and or engagement and in fine and performing arts. So I think there is a physical, to me, there's a physical component in that because we want kids to be engaged, and a lot of that revolves around sport and other voluntary activities that they do outside of school. And we have excellent PE teachers and PE courses. Anything else?
All right, I do have another one. And this just is, I guess it's a good opportunity to talk about with DCSU, because one of the things I know in one-on-one meetings with Dr. Marshausen that we've talked about is, we spend a lot of time on kind of the back end and dealing with the mental health challenges that we have in the district. Some of it is you just kind of want to go back and peel it all away and find out, like, how did we get here? And so with DCSU, one of the things I would just like to put out there is possibly a session on, when you have parents who have children who are older, I don't want to say older parents, but you have parents whose children are older and they've kind of been through it, and you have that lens of being reflective on their experience and maybe some things you did as a parent where you were pushing and driving and driving and pushing. And I think there's value in sharing that across the board with newer families who maybe just coming into this district, or maybe their children are younger, having, maybe roundtable discussions or something where you're really bringing those perspectives, because when it's all said and done, I think the pushing and the drive that this district has is wonderful, but I think it can also have very negative consequences. And when you talk about anxiety kind of at the forefront of a 9th grader, that to me is just something that makes a lot of sense, and I would hope that it would help parents, like I said, from the community. Maybe their kids have graduated, maybe they're older, and they just have a different perspective to offer.
Mr. Andres, as always, thank you, and appreciate your providing additional information about this important work that we do. Are there any questions for me from members of the board?
Sorry, I don't know. I have one. So there was an article I think I sent to you. It was from Mission America, and it was entitled, "Ohio School District Normalizes Child Abuse Symptoms in LGBTQ Presentation." And I just wanted to ask you about this. I think you've seen it. I wanted to ask about your response to it.
Well, I think that the article pulled together a series of different events and put them into one article as if there were a single event. The article talked about a Be Well event that took place 2 school years ago without putting a year to the date of April 30th. That was in partnership with another neighboring school district, in a presentation that was designed for parents by clinicians that parents had the option to go to if they chose. The information presented in that presentation wasn't designed to be professional development. It wasn't designed to be for students. It was designed for parents who wanted information about their child transitioning. There are some things in that presentation that are not our expectation in the Dublin City School District. In Dublin, we expect parents to be part of conversations about their children. In Dublin, we expect counselors to be in conversations with parents at each step along the way. And if there's a time where a counselor believes that a child is unsafe, this is when we call Children's Services, and we have other resources available. So the presentation did not mirror our expectations. In the same article, it referenced a box of clothing that was part of a student-organized group at Jerome High School in 2020-2021. The box of clothing was removed from the student population, and when a picture was taken, it was actually in the staff lounge, not accessible to students. Those clothes are not accessible to students. In fact, that box has been donated to Goodwill, and those clothes in the last several years have not been accessible to students. It kind of put those two things together as if they were ongoing situations in the Dublin City School District. As we talk about legal opinions and differing legal opinions in different circuit courts in the United States, and Mrs. Rigby and Mr. Valentine, you had the opportunity to sit with our legal counsel as we talked about some of the transgender issues and concerns that there are in our community. And Mr. Valentine had asked me to get additional legal opinions. And every school lawyer that I've talked to in Ohio and every superintendent and their school lawyer would say that the Sixth Circuit ruling has standing in Ohio. There are other circuit courts, as the article had said, that may have had differing opinions. But in the state of Ohio, we are obligated to follow what the court with jurisdiction says in our school district and in our state. So although there is some judicial opinions that differ in different parts of the country about Title IX and gender identity in Title IX, according to the lawyers that deal with schools in the state of Ohio, we're governed by the Sixth Circuit. And I think that's what both of you heard as well. So I think that, yes, everything in the article at one time happened. Everything in the article independently has been handled by our school district with purpose and intentional decision-making. When put together, I understand why it may concern some parents, and we hope that we're able to share accurate information when people are making decisions about the work that we're doing as a school board and an administrative team.
Any additional questions or comments on that? All right. Moving on to approval of the resolution to adopt, adopt Journey 2023 annual goals. It's recommended by the superintendent. The Board of Education approve the attached resolution to adopt Journey 2023 annual goals as listed. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Melody. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Gillis. Questions or comments outside of or in addition to anything that's previously been discussed?
Yes, I have some. questions and, well, mostly comments, I guess. I just want to share some of the notes and things that I found in regards to the recruitment goal. In researching this and looking at the importance of that goal, I found that research shows that all students, and especially students of color, benefit when they have the opportunity to learn from teachers of color. And those benefits go beyond just having a role model of color. Having a teacher of color is linked to positive academic, social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes. Studies have shown that having at least one teacher of color affects students of color in positive, specific ways, including boosting overall academic performance, improving reading and math test scores, improving graduation rates, increasing aspirations to attend college, increasing advanced course taking, reducing the number of absences, experiencing less disciplinary incidents, and having an increased positive social emotional outcomes like grit and self-efficacy. But research also should suggest that white students show improved problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity when they have diverse teachers, because interacting with people who are different from you builds your ability to solve problems, think critically, and fosters creativity. And a more recent finding has shown that the positive effects are not exclusively from matching student and teacher race. So even students who aren't students of color, who are assigned a teacher of color, also saw modest but statistically significant gains in math, reading, and self-efficacy compared to students who were assigned only white teachers, with the positive math and reading effects persisting into high school. Also, having a diverse workforce can build community ties and foster a sense of belonging. Communities of color often feel alienated from their school because they don't see themselves represented. Creating a large and more inclusive applicant pool does just that. It does not mean that the district will be discriminating against anyone or lowering standards. And just a side note, Ruby Bridges' birthday was Friday. She was born September 8th, 1954. She's now 69 years old. She was the first black student to attend a white-only school in Louisiana. And this was 6 years after Brown versus Board of Education, which is the Supreme Court decision which ruled segregation unconstitutional. Unfortunately, the white parents in Ruby Bridges School withdrew their students, so she attended class alone for an entire year. The staff refused to teach her except for one teacher, Barbara Henry, and similarly, parents across the nation resisted sending their kids to school with black children and didn't want their students to be taught by black teachers. Our nation lost many experienced and highly credentialed black educators, over 38,000 of them, due to racism in the form of dismissal, demotion, and forced resignation. After Brown versus Board of Education, this is what happened. The educator pipeline has still not fully recovered from this. And when those educators lost their jobs in education due to racism, it called into question the notion that education was the great equalizer. So yes, having educator role models in the classroom who can emphasize the importance of education for all students is important. And I have other questions in regards to other things, but the engagement piece that's also a part of the partnership goal. During that initial goal setting, we talked about making sure that there was a balance between the schools being represented at DCSU. And when the board gets a report back, I would like to see a breakdown of the school's participation. Going forward, I would also like to see data around who is attending the DCS events so we know which stakeholders we're reaching and which ones we need to do a better job at reaching. And I would also like to see some qualitative data around the perceived benefits of the DCS events from different stakeholders' perspectives. And perhaps we can incorporate that evaluation to be shared with the board later. I know that one goal is just to improve it by 20%, but I'd like to, if we could, when we have a report back, have some of additional data.
So noted. And Christie's back there shaking her head as well, so we got it.
Any additional questions or comments? Mr. Melody?
Yes, just really a point of clarification. In the resolution, it says the superintendent will update the board on progress towards meeting each goal in January 2024. And your update, you said it would be February. So is it safe to say the board will be updated in January, but the public presentation may not take place until February?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And at that time, is the board able to, at the mid-year, are we able to make modifications to a resolution that would be passed tonight? I mean, this isn't set in stone. This is our starting point, right, for this year?
The board can change any resolution that the board would like to change. And if the board gives me direction to go in that, to make changes, yes, we could shift and pivot at the board's request.
Mrs. Gillis, anything from you before we move forward? Not that you need to, I just want to make sure.
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mrs. De Silva, for sharing all that information. I appreciate everyone's questions. I guess the only thing to note is this is just for this school year, and we're going to use the data to then design what we do for next school year. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes. One of our 3 core values is always growing. The only way to know if we are getting better is to look at the data. As Mrs. De Silva has pointed out, one of the things that we have as a school district in a post-pandemic world struggled with is getting parent engagement at these events. We've held a series over the last 2 years of events that were sparsely attended by parents. This is a tribute to Always Growing, where we're putting many events together. We're having childcare available, and I know that that was utilized by some of our families at the first DCS University event. So our goal is to, for this year, see if this works, provide data back to the board, provide data that we can dive into, and make adjustments as needed. Is there something we should be doing differently and better that would allow us to connect with our families to better serve them? Ultimately, we are a service organization, and we provide the community and our parents a service, and we want to make sure that we're doing that to the best of our abilities.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
My only comments this evening would come around our staffing goal, and we've had individual conversations with Dr. Marshausen, and obviously information has been sent out as a team. I clearly, the staffing goal, I would say, if there's something that has the chance or opportunity to be polarizing, it's what we're considering this evening, that would be it. And I think that there's emotion on each side of the issue. And viewpoints on the issue, understandably so. From my perspective, as we look at it, I guess, I have faith in our team as we move forward in this. I think that there should be a continual search on our end. We have the best candidates more often than not applying. We see the numbers as we continue to look at how we are strategic on expanding our pool, not just from a diversity standpoint, but also from folks who may be coming into education as a second career, may be able to offer a perspective and life experiences in the teaching realm that a traditional candidate may not be. I'm hopeful that our HR department will continue to be exhaustive in that process. I think that we've laid out a goal that obviously takes into account expanding the candidate pool, and hopefully in a fiscally responsible manner as well as time, as we continue to do that. My faith, I guess, that I come back to is that I have faith and confidence that our team, our administrative team, will not jeopardize putting the best possible individual, whether or not it's a teacher, support staff, or whatever the case may be, in front of each of our classrooms, knowing and full confidence that that's the best possible person to be in that job. So those are my comments on that topic before we vote this evening, and I want to make sure I put that on the record. Mr. Kern, call the roll, please.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Reports and action items from the Treasurer's Office.
Just a few things this evening, just approval of a donation and a student activity purpose clauses. The one donation is from Debt PTO to purchase the Bloom subscription. I know Mrs. De Silva had a question earlier to Dr. Marshausen and myself, and I don't know if Dr. Marshausen had an explanation. If he hasn't already, he forwarded you an email about why we use Blooms and stuff like that. So from the communication standpoint to our parents in those buildings. But on the student activity purpose clauses, we have 3 this evening. We have the Jerome Hope Squad. One of my favorite activities is the Scioto Pickleball Club with that, and the Scioto Bread Club. Just a reminder that these are reviewed. These generate from the buildings and are reviewed typically by Mike Allring from that perspective over the secondary, and Samantha Allhouse if it's any elementary related clubs from that standpoint. So, and then it's underneath my area because there is a financial component to that and what they can be used for.
Questions or comments for Mr. Kern? It's recommended by the Treasurer, the Board of Education, approve items 6B and 6C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Gillis. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Reports from the Department of Academics.
Thank you. Well, our department has nothing requiring board action this evening. I did want to take a few moments to share an update regarding fall assessment processes across our K-12 buildings. These are underway, and the end of next week marks the end of our what we call fall assessment window. During that time, that's when MAP growth testing occurs in our K-8 buildings and in some spaces at the high school level. As you'll recall, that is an assessment that measures progress and growth over time, and we have had that assessment in the district for quite some time, so it allows us to look at longitudinal data for our students. At elementary, this also has included our KRA, or Kindergarten Readiness Assessment, and our literacy assessments as well. So this includes our DIBELS 8 measures. You'll recall that this is serving as our dyslexia screener in the first, second, and third grade space, but some of the measures are also in use in the K-5 space as we are looking at our readers. With that said, as noted earlier, when you're using a new assessment, it takes some training and some time, and you can imagine that some of our smaller buildings may finish assessing sooner than some of our larger buildings. And so as a district, we value equity of service. We want to make sure when we're thinking about which students will see our literacy support teachers, that in one building, more students aren't given opportunity than in another. So we do try to look with a district-wide lens at that data, and that coupled with the fact that we have a new assessment in place would be a good talking point for you to understand, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. As well, all of these assessments are used in conjunction with what I would call a classroom-based assessment or teacher-based assessment. And this is just ways that our teachers get to know their students in the fall so that they can make instructional decisions and differentiate for the individualized needs of our students. So thank you.
Any questions or comments as follow-up?
Mrs. Marple, what happens in in the space then between when the assessment is finished and when that child is administered services, if there's weeks of a gap there?
Sure, absolutely. There's typically not weeks of a gap, but our our teachers have access to data right away, and Tier 2 support can also happen in that Tier 1 space. So we have building teams looking at data on an ongoing basis. It's not a one-time event. So what you're talking about with that, those literacy team meetings, that's when we're really thinking about where and how we're going to staff the additional pull-out support for our students. We have students accessing services at all times and accessing intervention at all times. Yeah.
All right, there being nothing else, Department of Operations.
Good evening. I have nothing for approval tonight, but I would like to talk to you a little bit about stormwater retention. Maybe a little curveball on everything else that's been discussed tonight, but why not? So tomorrow, as you know, that where we're going to be, well, let me start off with saying that where we're going to be building Elementary 15, it has a stormwater retention pond on it. You know, it's the pond that takes all the stormwater runoff. But the odd thing about it is it's on two parcels. It's on our parcel and the city of Dublin. So as we're preparing for an Elementary 15, if Levy were to pass, we brought this up to the city, and it's something that they'd like to solve, and so would we, as soon as we can, because having water on both sites gets a little problematic. So I've worked with Brian Kern on this, and we feel that, you know, this is something we can get rectified with or without the levy. It's something we need to do anyway, and there's lots of reasons for that, and which I'll talk to you about a little bit. But the first thing is tomorrow at Jerome High School, the city is hosting, we're giving our PAC for this, for the local residents. So there's about maybe under 8 of them who might be affected on the pond being moved. And the city would like to talk to them and say, here's how the pond's going to be moved. So let me explain to you how this will be moved out. I put it in my weekly report with a bit of a graphic there, and I don't have a graphic in front of me now, but basically, we would take the retention pond if it stayed on our land, and we would put it underground. It's valuable real estate. This way we can use it. And those retention ponds are a bit of a safety hazard for us with all the little ones around. The city, if we were to put it underground, then the residents lose that ambiance, which I guess is very important to some of them, of having that pond out there. They look by it, the walking paths by it. So what the city has come up with, what we've came up with them, is that we will move the pond to their land and keep it above ground. It will not be on our spot at all. And this, we'll pay for it, but it'll be a great savings to the district, because by putting it underground is quite a bit of money. So we'll keep it above ground. This way, this residents keep the pond that they view all the time. The walking path does not have to be moved. And all the water retention piece and the stormwater folks and the folks at the city engineering office, everyone seems to be happy with how we've come up with this. There's been lots of meetings since March talking about this, and drawings and back and forth and what have you. So tomorrow at this meeting with the residents, we'll explain what it's going to look like with some pictures and what have you. And then September 21st, this goes in front of planning and zoning. So the parcel that we have for Elementary 15 is zoned in such a way that we do not have to go in front of planning and zoning for the changes we want to make. We still have to get permits, we still have to get approvals, but we don't have to go in front of planning and zoning. The parcel that we're moving the pond to, which is the city's, that we do have to go to planning and zoning. So I will be attending that with the city. The city's presentation will be there for support, and we'll have our civil engineer there as well to answer any questions. One of the reasons we're pushing to do this is not just the pond, and that is problematic, but this is something we can mitigate some construction. Construction costs continue to rise, and it is a big problem. So that land that the district, that the board bought last year, about that 100 acres on Industrial Parkway in Mitchell DeWitt, Union County, for example, would like to build a roundabout there. It's a very big growing area. And I don't know if you recall, but a couple months ago, the board sold back an acre of that land to Union County for them to build it. They were supposed to start this fall. Unfortunately, and this is the times that we're in, they had no public bidders, which is, for a road project like that, that's an attractive project, and to get no public bids is outstanding, is remarkable. So now that project's been kicked to the spring to do it then. But that is a sign of the times we're in. I do know that a lot of the projects we're currently on, we'll hire a contractor at risk, a CMR, and our CMRs hire subcontractors underneath them. And I know they're struggling on some of the projects that we currently have on getting that, just because it's what's in there. We do like to, we'll be having some public bids come up this year and projects that we're starting next year, and we always try to do this a year ahead, because by getting it a year ahead, not only do we mitigate costs, we get on people's calendars. Sometimes you get a better cost that way because you can reserve it far in advance. So as soon as we can get this worked out with planning and zoning, our proposals to have you a GMP. Now, the GMPs is, we've hired a CMR for elementary 15. Obviously, we would only give a GMP to build a location there if the levy were to pass. But since we've already have them, we will be proposing a GMP #1 just for the moving of this pond to the board for your review and approval. We're forecasting at the end of October, because we feel by that time we'll have all the numbers in place to get this done. And as soon as the board, if the board chooses to approve it, then we can start locking down contractors and everyone else we would need to get this site piece done. So that's a lot, but any questions I can answer?
All right, there being none, we will move on to HR.
Good evening, members of the board. Tonight's agenda is fairly light. I'll just cover some of the highlights here, starting with the certified agenda. The substitutes that are on there, there's 2 of them tonight. They're in the student support services area, and they're in a specialty area. They're paid at a different rate than our ESC substitutes are, so they're on for your approval. There's several supplemental and pupil activity contracts. They're for fall, winter, year-long sports, extracurricular, clubs, academics. There's also a list of athletic event workers. So for each of our buildings that use athletic event workers, those are on tonight for your approval. Moving on to our classified agenda, you'll see 6 resignations, and then a few new hires, and then salary changes on as well. The final item is our stipends. You'll see 11 stipends on tonight. A few of these are for lead roles for our teachers in content areas. Mentors for our newly hired teachers. There's a list for those depending on what year of the resident educator program or first year Dublin program. And then you'll see a few remaining stipends that cover some of those beginning of school year activities that we're just finishing those up as well. And that's it for the HR portion tonight.
Questions or comments? There being none, it's recommended by the superintendent, the Board of Education approve items 10A, and 10B, and 10C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Gillis. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Reports from communications.
I always have to adjust this because I'm so short. Okay. Good evening. We don't have a lot in terms of strategic communication since we spent so much time on it last time. But we are excited to share who the Hall of Fame class of 2023 is this year. The event will be held on Friday night. We will start with a ceremony at 5 and then a reception at 6. 5 of the 6 inductees will be there. One will not. I'll talk about that here in a second. But there's been lots of buzz this week about the inductees. There's some really big names this year, and we're really excited to honor them on Friday. So I just wanted to give them their, due time here at the board meeting. We have 4 who will get the Distinguished Alumni Award on Friday. We have Dr. Charles Elmaraghi. He is the Chief of Pediatric Otolaryngology, head and neck surgery at Nationwide Children's Hospital. And the Chief Medical Officer from Nationwide Children's emailed us today and said that he will be attending the event in support of Dr. Elmaraghi. So that was very exciting. The second Distinguished Alumni Award is Ned Neidhart. He will not be in attendance, but he does have a video acceptance speech that we will get to watch on Friday. He currently works in Hollywood as a special effects and makeup artist. He's dealing with the writer's strike right now, so he can't come east. He is a graduate of the class of 1985, and I apologize, Dr. Elmaraghi is a graduate of the class of 1992.
both Dublin High School before we had 3 high schools. Our third Distinguished Alumni Award is Ryan Prestel. He is a CEO, an entrepreneur, and he graduated from Dublin Kaufman in 2002. And then we have Nelson Yoder, who is an architect, co-founder, and principal of Crawford Hoying Development. He is Dublin High School class of 1994. Our Young Alumni Achievement Award is going to Samantha Strange. She is the founder and owner of the Cheesecake Girl, which is a local cheesecake dessert company, if you're familiar with that. And she graduated in the class of 2011 from Dublin Kaufman High School. And then our Outstanding Service Award is going to go to former chief of the Washington Township Fire Department, Gene Bostick. And I believe Gene is 100 years old, so he will be here this weekend, or almost 100. He is very excited, and he has called Keyburn multiple times in the last week, so we are very excited. He is very honored, and so we are excited to give him that award as well. So congratulations to our Alumni Hall of Fame class of 2023, and we hope to see all of you and anyone else. The induction ceremony and reception are open to the public, so anybody who would like to come. We'll also have past honorees there as well. So it's a nice evening with lots of people who have been through the school system, and you'll be able to see the quality of graduates and the good work that we're doing here in the district, because we are really turning out some fantastic individuals, and this is kind of a testament to that. So thank you.
Thank you. Items for board discussion or future agenda items?
Just a couple notes. We will have a community conversation on September 20th here as part of our DCS University. And our next board meeting is off of our typical Monday schedule. We are on Tuesday the 26th, as we will be meeting in council chambers at City Hall, and we will be recognizing our National Merit Award winners at that event. So that the 26th meeting will be at City Hall. Of note, I will be giving a Levy informational session to our city council members on the 25th. So I get to be there 2 nights in a row, and we'll share that information with city council, who has been very helpful and very open to allowing us to share our facts about the levy with them in open session.
Just one quick reminder for the board. The spreadsheet with all the different engagement groups is up. So if you want to sign up for that, or if you can't attend, just remember to let the other board members know so that we can have someone else attend. Thanks.
I just have one thing. I would actually like to talk at a future meeting here about policies to eliminate existing pornographic, sexually explicit materials in our schools. This past week, we received information about a book at Kaufman entitled All Boys Aren't Blue. We've had conversations in the past with parents and community members on sexually explicit books found at various schools in our community. And, you know, this is something, I don't think this is a partisan issue. I think this is something that we should address. You know, I would like to discuss how these materials came to be in our libraries. I would like to talk about steps to remove them from our libraries. And, you know, I think it's about keeping this kind of material away from children. And a litmus test that I think that is worthwhile, if it's not something that one of us would stand and read out loud at a board meeting or want to have read to us, I don't think it belongs in front of our children.
We have policy, again, as I referenced earlier, so that's something that obviously we can have additional discussion in that space, but clearly there can be discussion outside of that as well.
But this is the book that's been pulled and we're undergoing, yeah, is that,
You wanna jump in?
yes?
The
Yeah.
book that was brought to our attention is under administrative review at this point.
Yep.
All right.
Mrs. Gillis, I do not have the unilateral authority to remove a book from our library. The only way once a book is in our library, it can be removed is by board action. I do have the authority to ask for review of books and materials that are in the library to make a decision if there is such a time that we would bring that material to you as a board for removal. I also have the authority to reassign materials if it's grade appropriate to put them in different locations. At this time, when that material was brought to my attention and there were concerns on my part about the content, I asked that that book be pulled for administrative review so that we can see what we want to do as we move forward. But under board policy, removal of a book would require the Board of Education to vote to take action to remove that book.
So just from a timeline standpoint, to be clear, you obviously, ahead of this meeting, notified us that the book was being pulled for administrative review. The next step in the process is you'll be communicating or getting back to us with additional information, and from there, we as the board can obviously decide if there's further action on our end or pending what your recommendation may be. We can obviously hear that as well.
Yes, sir.
Are there any questions or comments to that, Mrs. Gillis? You?
No, but I'm going to start reading this book tonight because it honestly sounds very interesting. So I think we should start there.
I read it over the weekend.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Melody. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-2.